I'm Steve Hoffman. I'm known as the Tax Translator, and I'm with the Ordinary Success Project. The Ordinary Success Project is a transformation of the Ordinary Success Company. That was Joanne Dennison's, my business and life partner, and we blended my skills into that to assist nonprofit organizations and higher education with their tax problems. There's a recent survey that was done by a national association. Most colleges, universities, and nonprofits do not have a designated tax manager. Those duties are dispersed throughout the organization. Bits and pieces are done in different departments, and those people do not, it's not their primary responsibility, so they don't receive training, and they don't receive any updates on law changes, and they don't know how it impacts them. So my role as the tax translator is to simplify and clarify that for them in some common language that they can understand. For instance, I was a tax manager with 3 different universities over a period of 12 years. So when I explain the tax code to them, I do it in their language with real-life examples on their campus, and then I tell them what it means and what they have to do to avoid any of the potential tax risk and exposure that they have. Well, you know, I have a 7-step tax pyramid, and the biggest area is awareness. Many of them are just not aware of things that change, how they have to report it, when they have to report it, how to avoid penalties. Consequently, many of them are playing what I call audit roulette. They're just hoping and hoping and hoping that they don't receive a call from the IRS. I know several people at universities who have approached me and said, I wish we would get audited because I know something is wrong. And tax is slowly and gradually coming to the table. It is slowly becoming more of a focus by the Vice President of Business and Finance, for instance, because of the increased focus by the IRS on nonprofits. Last year alone, they revoked over 250,000 exemption status of nonprofits for failing to file. So that's their most valuable assets. Without that exemption status, all of their revenue becomes subject to taxation. The contributions are no longer deductible, for instance, and that's how most nonprofits receive their operating revenue. Could have a serious impact. In addition to my speaking and presentation at schools and universities about tax issues, I do consulting. So the second step is compliance. So I will go in and review their policies and procedures, if there are any. I'll make sure that they're up to date. The next step is the monitoring and enforcement of those policies and procedures. Many schools may have a written policy. It may be 10 years old, and they think they have one. It is outdated. It is no longer current with the law. So I review all those policies and procedures to give them some structure or a foundation for a tax compliance strategy. Next step would be reporting that properly, assigning specific responsibilities, and follow-up to see that those responsibilities are carried out. I'm consulting with a university right now who, for some reason, 8 years ago, the person, I think, left the university and they stopped filing returns. They received an envelope in the mail from the IRS with a $3 million assessment. So there is huge potential exposure. And like I say, there's been an awful lot of focus by the IRS on higher ed and nonprofits. It is no longer a privilege. To be a nonprofit. It's a right granted to you by the IRS. And this affects hospitals, universities, all nonprofits. They view it as an untapped resource. For instance, the tax-exempt division of the IRS is the smallest division within the IRS, and for the last 50 years, it's been rather dormant. Last year, IRS's budget was cut. However, that division was the only division within the IRS to receive increased budgeting and increased hiring for that particular division. So they're looking at them right now. Typically, it goes back to the whole pyramid. They're unaware of it. They don't know about it. There are currently projects established by the IRS because they've identified nonprofits and some higher educational institutions that have never filed certain types of forms. The IRS has issued 4 specific questionnaires to colleges and universities about 2 years ago. And the way the IRS works is they issue a questionnaire, they get a bunch of information, they have hundreds of people in cubes that analyze that information, and then they make decisions on that. They're right now trying to understand the way higher education works, and they don't. They've never explored it before. Audits of colleges and universities were widely unknown. As a result of one of those questionnaires, they audited 40 universities, and based on the results of that, they've decided to audit 400 more. The IRS exempt divisions is now participating in a research project that comes along about every 5 years, where they will audit 500 tax-exempt organizations per year for the next 3 years on one issue only, and that's employment taxes. So that national research project is, the results of that are what I term the secret Coca-Cola recipe, because they never tell you the formula by which they select returns to be audited, but the research project forms the basis of how returns are selected. And this is the first time the tax-exempt entities division has ever participated in that. Another example of that is the IRS commissioner will typically issue a 5-year plan for the IRS. And I'm not going to tell you how many of those I've read, but I've read several, and the current IRS commissioner was the first time in the last 25 years that nonprofit taxation has ever been a goal of the IRS commissioner. So it has the focus and the attention of the commissioner, and what the commissioner wants the IRS will do. Congress also is actively looking at higher education. There's one university in Washington, D.C. that I term was the Enron of higher education. It was on the front page of the Washington Post 3 weeks running, and Congress took a look at that. As a result, that focused more and more attention upon colleges and universities. Now, when I say colleges and universities, it goes beyond the 4-year traditional school that you may be thinking of. There's a special project for community colleges in the works. Community colleges are the fastest growing segment in higher education right now. The need for tax advice is even greater at the community college level, because they absolutely have nobody devoted to tax at this point in time. My engagements come from several sources. I publish a newsletter that goes out for free. It's a tax newsletter for nonprofits. I currently have a couple thousand people on that. And I explain in the newsletter things that are going on with the nonprofit world. I receive engagements from that. I speak at National Association meetings. I present tax updates, and typically I receive some follow-up from that says, would you like to come out to our school or university or out to our nonprofit organization and tell us more? Because I generally may only get 1 hour or 2 hours sometimes in front of a national association, so it's difficult to tell them everything. So they will oftentimes request that I come out and I can talk to their entire finance staff, because taxes spans the whole organization, whether it's accounts payable, procurement, payroll, human resources, athletics in the case of universities. So it's throughout the organization, and everybody needs to be aware of it. It is their most valuable asset from a couple of different perspectives. One is the financial risk. Second is the reputational risk. If you're on the front page of the newspaper, and there have been several examples with a university in particular, that will affect their enrollment, their contributions, their endowment for years to come. That particular university has already spent over $12 million in its defense. So the reputational risk sometimes far outweighs the financial cost of the IRS assessment, penalties, and interest, because it continues to grow. And there are multiple examples of national organizations in the past, if you become aware of them, of less than compliant attitudes and practices on behalf of the nonprofits. Actually, some of them bordered on downright greed. It's amazing. It truly is.